Ooh. Everybody, welcome back to our Wednesday night edition with the NFL draft being tomorrow night. We moved everything from Wednesday to Thursday. A lot of faces out there. I'm Joe Favorito. We've been hosting this now. This is our fourth, right, guys? I can't remember now. But we're going to keep doing these every week. Again, I want to encourage everyone to ask questions tonight. We've got a great guest from the Pacific Northwest, Mike Golub. Mike's had a pretty storied career now with the Timbers and the Thorns. Worked for the Rangers, for the leagues, for Nike for a long time. So he'll go into his career. And then obviously we want to keep it short on that and go to as many questions as we possibly can. I know we're going to have a bunch of them. And on a housekeeping note, we're going to go back to next Thursday. And at the request of the group, I think we're going to try and find an agent to kind of talk about what the agent business is for next week. We'll keep you posted and post it on Monday. But once again, tell your friends, tell your teachers, tell your siblings, tell other athletes. You know, we want to keep growing this community. It's your community. Thanks for joining us. So I'm going to turn it over to Mike. Mike Golub, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Joe. Joe's great to see you. Joe's one, as you guys probably know, because you've taken class with him. He's just one of the very best people and minds in the business. So you count yourself lucky to know Joe. I certainly do. Anyway, nice to virtually meet all you guys, and good for you for being forward-thinking in your careers. I certainly wasn't. When I was your age, I was a pretty good student and pretty average athlete, and I just had no idea what I was doing. Went to the best school I could get into, which was Dartmouth, and thought I was going to be a lawyer, and pursued, political science major, and it really took a mentor. And at that time, sports business was vital, but it wasn't nearly the as robust a business, and there wasn't as many opportunities, and it wasn't necessarily a track that people thought about in the same way that you guys are now. But I actually signed up for an on-campus interview at Dartmouth with some sort of retail management program, and I was like, why did I sign up for this? I was about to just blow it off altogether, but I went and I sat down and said, listen, his name was Rich. I said, Mr. whatever his name was. I said, Rich, so sorry I signed up. This is just, my heart's not into this. I don't want to waste your time. He goes, no, sit down. And we became close friends, and he basically said, Mike, you got to do what you love, and you got to pursue your passion. And he stayed in my life for a while. I lost touch with him eventually. But lesson one is find mentors, find your personal board of directors, and people like Joe who are in your life already. Hold tight, stay in touch with, stay close with. The best thing about this business, one of the legacies, is just the kind of relationships we have, Joe. I mean, it's the people, amazing people we're able to work with and come in contact with. And, not only is that a great legacy, but it's really the engine to finding the opportunities that I know all of you want to find. So that was really sort of an inflection point for me. I started thinking, hey, maybe, I've always loved sports, knew sports. And so it was then I started really thinking about sports as a vocation. And so I worked my ass off to get my first job. And I was basically a production assistant at Major League Baseball Productions in New York City. I was making $12,500 a year working in New York City, eating a lot of top ramen and macaroni and cheese. And we were the production arm of Major League Baseball, producing all of baseball's, not the live shows, that was still the networks, but all baseball's post-production, videos, This Week in Baseball, all the things that you see coming out of the leagues. I was just sort of a grunt. Moved up pretty quickly. We were young and growing, and began producing shows in my third year. The World Series film, the official All-Star film, and it was awesome. It was very creative. Really learned the broadcast piece of the business, which is really a vital building block of our business. You don't have to know how to shoot cameras or direct But you need to understand the role broadcast plays in the economic equation of sports. It's critical. We can talk more about that later. But that gave me a really good grounding on that piece, that pillar of our business. But from there, I really decided I didn't want to pursue a career in the production side of broadcast, and that's a great avenue for many. I really wanted to be in the business side of sports. And so I decided to apply to business school. And there are some great programs, graduate programs for that are sports focused. And, like the one Joe's involved in, and there's a bunch. And that wasn't necessarily the case when I was applying to grad school. I took the route of just getting as good a business, a master's in business education as I could, with the eye of always wanting to stay in the sports business. So applied to school. One of the essay questions at Stanford, where I ended up going, was, what do you see yourself doing in 10 years? It was basically, running a front office sports team, which took me a little more than 10 years, but I kind of did it. I went to Stanford and got, a really amazing sort of overall business foundation that's really still serves me today. I get the question a lot, is business school the right avenue? And you guys obviously are not at that juncture yet. You may be at some, a few years. For me, it was great. I really, really rounded out my skill set, my thinking, my maturity as a business person. Met some amazing people along the way, back to my earlier point. So for me, it was incredible. I worked that summer, interestingly, between years of business school at Apple. And it was really, Apple was young at the time, and I wish I had bought stock. But it was, for me, it was a cool summer. It was fun, but it was great because it confirmed for me that sports was it. And so it sometimes takes doing something else to sort of remind you why you really want to, it's like having a bad relationship reminds you, well, what a good relationship's all about. And so that was my summer at Apple. It was great, but it really confirmed and reaffirmed my commitment to be in the sports industry. So I got out of Stanford, and we had a class of 320. I was like one of 5 people who didn't have a job at graduation, all these fancy jobs these people had. And got a job, actually done a research project, another lesson, while at Stanford I did a research project on the XFL, which was just launching its first iteration at the time, and came in contact with the people who ran the stadium and arena in Oakland. And that was my first job at a business school. I was director of marketing for the stadium and arena in Oakland. So let me back up for a minute. So while you're at school, I would highly recommend using your time, the courses that you take, the research projects you do, the papers you write, to advance your knowledge about sports. People are, really generous with their time, particularly when it's, hey, I'm Olivia, I'm doing a research project, can I buy a cup of coffee and pick your brain for 20 minutes? That's a much easier conversation for people, a lot of people, than, hey, my name is Olivia, I want a job, can you help me? So use the time, you guys are off to are you juniors now, mostly?
They're all over the place. High school, juniors, a bunch of college, they're all over the place.
Yeah, so so you guys are going to be entering college in a year and a half or so, whatever, and use your time, if you're serious about this, use your time in school to advance your knowledge base and network in the sports industry. I always say, I've got a lot of people who come and say, I'm interested in sports. I go, why? Because I love sports. I'm like, that's a good place to start. But people go into medicine, they don't choose to be a doctor. I like medicine, I'm going to be a doctor. I enjoy the field of medicine, but I'm going to, to do all the training, education to become a doctor. Much like if you want to be a chef, I like food, I'm going to be a chef, I can do it. Yeah, you have to like food, and you have to like cuisine, but you also have to study and develop your skills. It's no different in sports. If I see a resume come across my desk, I want that person to have a passion and a love for our industry, but I also want them to have the skills, the experience, the knowledge to give my organization results. So advice, use your time in college and beyond to always improve your knowledge base, your experience base. So when you get a chance to meet someone like Joe or me and they're looking for a job, we're like, Matthew knows what he's doing. He's committed. He's passionate. He's got some real experience. He's going to help my organization. So after business school, Oakland College team, home of the Warriors, the home of the Raiders, and the Oakland A's. And it was, in retrospect, a great learning ground because the facility side of the sports business is absolutely critical. And that's why you see in New York City, how many new venues over the last 6 years, Joe?
6, at least 6.
8.
Yeah.
I mean, crazy. It's the economics of pro sports is so challenging because player salaries, is a disproportionate high amount of your expenses that for franchises to make it, they've got to control their facilities and really have a facility that can generate the kind of revenue they need to make your organization tick. And so for me, working in a NBA, MLB, and NFL venue straight out of B school was fantastic. From there, I got recruited and I became director of special events at the National Basketball Association. And this is the group that managed all the league's events, All-Star Game, finals, draft, international games, and it was awesome. I was late 20s and I was managing a group of about 30 people, events around the world, traveling around the world. People reporting to me Tokyo and Geneva, and it was just, and I was working, with all the NBA teams. And so for someone late 20s, early 30s, it was a really heady job. I was working my butt off, and I had no life, and the relationship I had didn't work out. And that's something we can talk about later, sort of the work-life balance. That's sometimes hard in this business. But it was incredible. Worked very closely with David Stern, who I saw a few months before he passed away, and met amazing people, and did that for 6 years. And it was an awesome, really formative time in my career. From there, I went to Nike. They were a former colleague of the NBA, was starting a group called Nike Sports Entertainment. And the notion was Nike has all these investments and these relationships with athletes and teams and spend all this money on endorsements. Can we build an event business around those relationships? We just signed Tiger Woods at the time, and we had a week of Tiger's year as part of the deal. We had the Brazilian national football team and Jordan. And so we brought Tiger to Japan. We brought Jordan to different places around the world, built events around it. Ultimately, it wasn't a business that Nike really felt moved the dial for them. And like a lot of things Nike does, like the watch business and like a bunch of other parts of business, they tried, but it's not sort of a big part of their long-term future. They disband, which is what they did. But it was great. It got me out here with a part of the country that I had loved and wanted to be in, and got me to another side of sports. It was a really cool couple years. From there, I did a quick detour in sort of a startup sports tech company, and then went to work my first job on the team side with the Vancouver Grizzlies. The Vancouver Grizzlies were an expansion team that was in its 6th or 7th year in Vancouver, and were floundering. Had never even come close to a winning season, and were really struggling. And they got sold to an owner who hired me and I think one of your previous guests, Andy Dolich. So Andy hired me, and we were trying. Our charge was to try to reinvent and re-energize and kickstart a floundering team. Halfway through our first year of trying to do that, our owner announced that he was moving the team. It would be the first NBA team to have moved in 18 years. We had a third of the season still to play in Vancouver. He wanted to move the team for the next year. We did this auction, essentially, and chose Memphis to move the Grizzlies because Memphis was coming forward with a completely publicly financed arena. FedEx came with a 25-year guaranteed naming rights deal. And so in what had to be a record time, we moved, we hit the ground with 20 people in Memphis in June to launch a season that fall, that October. It was crazy. Joe, do I have time for a little story?
Yeah, of course.
So again, we had nothing. We had no sponsors, no broadcasters, and the head of marketing for FedEx goes, Mike, you got to listen to the analyst, for the Ole Miss basketball. He's really good. So I listened to it, and it's okay. Then I found out that this guy owned 25 Taco Bells in the Memphis region. So we sat him down and said, Sean, I'm sitting down. Sean, if you can bring in a Taco Bell sponsorship, you can have the radio job. So Sean delivers a Taco Bell sponsorship. We give him the radio job. He becomes a great announcer and a good friend and stayed with the team for years. But 3 years later, we're at pregame in the arena, and he comes and goes, Mike, I want you to meet my new son. Son? Because I knew he had 2 teenage kids. I'm like, Sean, new son? And Sean brings me over to this guy, Michael, 6'6", African-American. It turns out that Michael Orr, I don't know if you guys remember Michael Orr in Blindside. If you guys ever saw the movie Blindside, but this was the Blindside folks. This was the guy who adopted this homeless youth, Michael, who became
John Toohey, played by Tim McGraw in the movie.
Yeah, so just one of those stories. Anyway, we launched it. We built the team from scratch, built this arena, and launched the city's first ever sports team. And again, it's just a remarkable experience. I feel very lucky to start a team from scratch in a city that never had a pro sports team. Was just an amazing ride. And from there, I got recruited to go be the head of business for the New York Rangers, where Joe and I reconnected. Joe was with the Knicks at the time, and it was a bumpy ride, I'd say, for a lot of us there, because it's a challenging organization for a lot of reasons. And I was certainly not immune to that. And but I got to the point where I really wanted to live out here and choose where I lived and not go where the job was, which is hard sometimes in this business, as Joe can attest. But I chose to move to Portland with my wife, and got a job as CEO of the Trailblazers in the NBA, and they were going through a tumultuous time themselves. And then I was 3 years in when the new owner of the minor league baseball and soccer team here in Portland, at this incredible stadium, it didn't look like this at the time, said, hey, I think we're going to get an MLS team. Would you like to help run it and launch it? And I jumped at it. Again, chance to start a team from scratch in a sport that's so on the rise, and a league that was on the rise. So came 2 years before we launched, and we built the organization from scratch, built the brand from scratch. Didn't know what we thought we'd be moderately successful at least, and it's been wild. We've sold out every game we've ever played. We have a waiting list of 15,000 for season tickets. We've expanded our stadium. We've been recognized nationally as Sports Team of the Year twice. We've got all sorts of community awards. And then 2 years in, head of U.S. Soccer, Sunil Gulati, a colleague of Joe's, who's was head of the U.S. Soccer at the time, called us up and said, hey, we're starting a women's league. This is the third time we're going to do it right. Portland like to take a team. And we just launched the Timbers, and we analyzed and thought about it. We said, if it's going to work anywhere, it's going to work in Portland. And we took what we named the Portland Thorns, launched our second team in 3 years. And we're now in our 8th year, and we're averaging 20,000 fans a game. We have more fans than any women's sports team in the world. It's been crazy, and it's remarkable. We've got 8 World Cup players on our team, 4 Americans, and I knew we were onto something. I think it was the second year my wife and I went down to the Apple store in downtown Portland, and this young 23-year-old hipster dude was helping us. You know, he's inked up and he's got the piercings. A really cool young guy, and he didn't know I was with the club. And my wife said, "Hey, are you into the Timbers?" He goes, "Yeah, definitely into the Timbers, but really into the Thorns." Unsolicited, like my wife and I looked and said, "Woo, we're onto something." So that's been awesome because not only going to start another team that's been very successful, but I feel like we're paving the way for young female athletes of tomorrow, and paving the way for women's sports. We're showing what's possible. So it's been a crazy fun ride in my career. It's been a lot of highs, definitely some lows, and that's part of the business. But I'm happy to say that, you know, I found you know, a role that I love in a city that I love. I'm able to work really hard and immerse myself, which is something I've always done. But in my last, you know, in this job, I've been able to also have balance and great family life and working out and doing stuff, you know, avocational things. And so that's been, I don't know if Joe, you feel it's been a struggle I had when I was younger, was finding that right balance. But you know, it's interesting. There's study after study that says what are the determinants of job satisfaction? What are the 6, 7 things that people point to that make them happy in their respective jobs? So I'll ask you guys, what do you think? Where do you think compensation is on that list?
Location possibly is one.
Yeah, like where you are, and for sure. Where do you think compensation pay is on that list?
Sorry. Okay.
Like third or fourth, I'd say.
Yeah, it's typically 5th or 6th. You know, I make a great living. You know, that money that I never thought I'd make. I don't have a private jet and 6 homes in the islands, but I make a great living. But compensation is 5th or 6th typically in most of these studies. It's pretty consistent. So what would you guys say, you know, is 1 through 5 in these studies? If it's not money, I'm happy in my job because
what you're doing in your job.
Other
you
thoughts?
enjoy the company that you work for?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, here's some of the things. One is feeling part of something bigger than you are, which I think someone referenced. Feeling like I'm part of something bigger than me. Feeling like I'm making a difference. Being appreciated. All right, so I'm part of this great organization, but I'm not appreciated. You know, you're not going to be happy. Working with good people, having other interests and healthy balance in life is a big part of it too, right? You can have a great job, but if you have, you know, a shitty personal life and no other interests that you're pursuing, something's going to give. And so, you know, and listen, those levers can change in different points in your career. And, you know, coming out of college, maybe it's work, and establish yourself. And maybe when you get to be, you know, my age or even older, like Joe, you know, you can, you know, things may change. But keep that in mind, right? And everybody has their own equation and their own answer to those questions, right? There are some people who definitely money's number one, and that's okay, as long as they're, you know, they're true to themselves and honest about it. And some people is like, I just don't want to fucking work after 5 o'clock at night. I just want to get on my bike, and that's cool too. And you know, so you know, part of the journey that all of you are going to go on is to sort of figure that out for yourselves. And for me, you know, if I'm answering my own question, for me it was being part of a community, performing a role and being part of an organization that's a central part of a community and part of the community fabric where we can make a difference. And that's to me the power of sports. Two is just, working with really good people and for good people. And that wasn't always, it's not always the case in sports, but where I was happiest, that was an affirmative. And then having a balance, having a life. Love what I do and so into it, but I love a lot of other things in life and want to have the ample time to do those. So that was my circuitous journey to what I'm doing here in Portland. But been on the team side, been on the league side, been on the broadcast side, been on the sponsor side, been on did a little high tech stint, and I think having all those different purviews in our industry, I think has served me really well. I can understand how all the pieces work together, and in the end, running a sports team, it's really how all the functions and all the elements work together harmoniously, and bringing in all of the pieces of all the tools and all the building blocks of a business and really making them work harmoniously. And that's the art of the deal. And I think having had the multidiscipline, cross-function, cross-company experience that I've had, I think has served me well. So anyway, Matthew, I'd love questions about anything.
Great,
So
thank you.
Before we get to the questions, which are going to be in the queue, the one question, Mike can answer a lot of questions. The one question we don't want to ask him that he can't answer is when MLS and the NWSL are coming back. Anything else? Open game. Matthew, I turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you for giving that introduction. That was really great. First, we're going to have Lucas has a question. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Lucas. I'm from New York. I attend MLS games like once a year. I understand what an empty stadium is like because I watch NYCFC. So my question is, what is the key to franchise success?
In the MLS or generally, Lucas?
Generally, but I'd also like to specifically hear about the MLS.
Yeah, it's a great question. And, you see places like us, which have never had an empty seat, and you see other venues, but you see that in football too. You go to a game in Jacksonville, it's half empty. And, you go to a game in Green Bay and there's a waiting list. And Chicago been sold out, but, a lot of baseball, go to Tampa Bay and it's far from. So there's that spectrum of sort of, and some of it's cyclical. There's some correlation to winning, but I don't believe, I would not answer it with win. Win helps. As John Madden once said, winning is a great deodorant. Winning helps. But to me, Lucas, the key is developing a bond with your community, developing this visceral, emotional relationship with your community, not just your fans, certainly your fans, but the broader community. And sports is in a unique position to do that. You don't see a lot of people like, I love Comcast, I love Time Warner, I'm wearing Time Warner on my chest, right? But you all do business with Time Warner and Comcast, you have to. But you see people getting tattoos of Timbers and Thorns, and they love the team. And there's this trust that people have, right? You've got to build this trust with your fan base and with the community, and you've got to get people to feel about your team from here, not from here. I love the Timbers. I love the Cubs. I love the Yankees. They're my team through thick or thin, right? And so the question obviously is, how do you get to that point where people love you and bleed you and breathe you and come to your games even if you suck? You do that by just delivering, giving back to the community, treating your fans at every touch point exceedingly well, giving them a great experience in every interaction they have with you, whether it's here at the stadium, whether it's online, social media, whether it's community appearances, whether it's on broadcast. You're treating them with respect and dignity, and you're making what it's like to be a Timbers and Thorns fan something they can be eternally proud of. And it sounds so simple, and it's amazing how many teams fuck it up. And it's not always easy. But I believe if you went around Portland and said, tell me about the Timbers and Thorns, you would get, even from people who don't go to games, God, they're good. They're a good organization. They care about Portland. They do a really good job. Going to games is a blast. It's really, that kind of feeling. You would get that pretty unanimous, pretty consistently from people, even people who aren't fans. And so it's building this bond, Lucas, and building this relationship you have in the community, and keeping this trust and doing everything you can to ensure that trust is never broken. And sort of being guided by that in all the decisions you make. And it sounds so fundamentally easy, and it's not always. But great question.
Great. Now we're going to I think Lewis. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Mike, I appreciate your time today. I'm calling in from DC. I'm with the Washington Wizards. Got an invite from Joe. To a point, I think, I spent a good amount of time in Portland for school, right outside of Portland, Oregon. So I definitely enjoy the atmosphere, the fan base over there. Moda Center, definitely easily one of the best audience, just fan base overall. My questions is focused on some of the lessons that you took from the 2009 recession. We're going through this pandemic now. Are there anything that you can share with us as far as how your strategy looked like back then in 2009, and how some of that could be applied to the point in time now?
Yeah, it's a great question, Lewis. And it was interesting. We were actually during that recession launching the team, out for the first time to the market, selling sponsorships and tickets. It was a particularly challenging time. But here's what I'd say. We were lucky to have an owner who has a long-term view. And that is a very, very hard perspective to have in sports, because it's win now, fill your stadium now, let's make the money now so we can pay these players now. And listen, that's not dissimilar to a lot of businesses and a lot of industries. This pressure to deliver now. I think any good business, but particularly good sports business, has one eye on the now and the present. Listen, we want to win and we want to deliver results today, but the other eye, on the long-term health. So, for example, Lewis, we've sold out every game. We have a waiting list, as I mentioned. So Joe's a professor. Your economics professor would say, "Oh, you've got more demand than supply. Prices, you could raise prices. There's price inelasticity because you're sold out." So we could have raised prices aggressively and not seen a dent in our attendance. But we felt that was the wrong thing to do, because we're building this long-term relationship with our fan base and the community. And we're building long-term avidity. And, look back to your question, Lucas, right? If we had done that, and we might have chipped away at the trust. And when we had an off year, or when the next economic downturn happens, you might have seen a much more erosion. But we were like, we're building this in the long term. We're building a foundation. We're building it so that the 7-year-old who buys a Timbers jersey is going to be buying season tickets in 20 years. That's the mentality that we remind ourselves to continue to have, and we make decisions on that basis. So McDonald's really wanted to be a sponsor in our first year, and the local people are good, and they're currently sponsors of the Thorns. But we said, no, we want to do business with the local, kind of our Shake Shack, if you will, our local burger joint, because it's a better brand for us, and they can tell our story about us better than McDonald's can. It's a better brand association. So we left considerable amount of money on the table in that particular sponsorship deal, because we felt that brand association and that partnership served the brand better in the long term. So it's a great question, Lewis, and it's I think it's just really doing the things to create a really solid business foundation and a solid trust with your stakeholders, such that you can weather the bad seasons, the player issues are inevitable, the economic volatility that's inevitable, and the COVID smacked sports teams in the butt, no question about it. But I think because of all the things I just described, we're going to come out of it real strong, and certainly relative to other sports teams because all the things I just talked about.
Sweet. Appreciate it.
Great, thank you. Now we have Huckleberry with a question.
Hey, Mike. I'm Huckleberry Jones. I'm from Los Angeles, California, and my question is about like the more big players that are coming to your leagues, the celebrity owners like David Beckham, and the overall expansion. And how do you think that will impact the growth of the MLS, not just in the States, but worldwide appeal as well?
Yeah, thank you, Huckleberry. Yeah, it was interesting. The MLS is 25 years old. When Beckham came, it was a transformative moment for the league to have a global icon. And there was a phase sort of in our kind of second phase of the league, maybe in year 12 to 15, where getting big names, even if they were kind of on the tail end of their career, was critical for the league. I think we've moved past that as a league. Listen, it's great to have stars, but we're making our own stars, and we're growing. We're becoming more and more what they call in soccer a selling league. There was a player, Miguel Almiron, who was a 20-year-old Venezuelan player, Paraguayan player, I should say, made his name in Atlanta, got sold to English Premier League team for $20 million, and that's a great story. And so, yeah, stars are important, but in the end, we felt we've got to keep improving the quality of play in our league. And we do that by, yes, bringing in a lot of stars, but also growing young players and growing our academies and devoting more and more money to player salaries. And so MLS has grown leaps and bounds in terms of the quality of play and the respect it's had around the world and its ability to sell players. And so even in our 10 years of the league, the trajectory has been amazing. And so I always say if sports leagues were stocks, MLS is a growth stock. I'd say baseball is probably not a growth stock. And so if I was a young person looking at a sport to pursue a business career in, soccer is really attractive because, to your point, Huckleberry, we're growing it. The business is growing. The number of teams are growing. The expansion story has been amazing. We were team 18 in 2011, and we have teams 27 and 28 coming in next year at $300 million franchise fees. We pay $35 million. And there's no shortage of cities that want teams. So it's been a remarkable success story. And so I think, and we've moved away from having to, get the washed up stars in the tail end of their career to growing your own stars with a mix of established stars. But it's a league that players want to play in now because it's great venues, great crowds, and for a lot of players around the world coming to the States and applying their craft of soccer in the States is a dream. So great question, Huckleberry. And by the way, very cool name.
Thank you.
What do your friends call you?
Huck, if they,
Huck?
yeah, usually.
Like it. Cool. Good question, man.
Great. Now we have Michael on.
Hi, Mike. Thanks so much for being here, for doing this. My name is Michael Kahn, and I am calling from Seattle, Washington, Sounders country. So
next question, please.
Yeah, I think. No, but actually, it's kind of a piggyback off of Huckleberry's question. I actually saw I don't know if you followed John Wall Street's reporting, but he had an interesting column the other day that said that MLS is actually uniquely positioned to come out relatively well ahead of other leagues because of the, immense stability that they have in a single entity. So, and not only that, but obviously there is a big broadcast deal coming for MLS, and I believe 2023. I might be off a year or two, but the notion was because there's all this instability in Europe, there's sort of going to be fruit that's going to be lowered, and there's going to be an opportunity to bring more stars that are in their prime. And I'm wondering if that, and this might be again getting way too far ahead, but I'm wondering if that is maybe a view that you have, that like the Portland Timbers have, and that's shared around MLS as if we get through this could be a real opportunity to beef up the star power for the next few years and leverage everything we can to get best, broadcast deal possible.
Great question, Michael. Even if you're from Seattle. By the way, we're very friendly with our counterparts at the Sounders. They're some of our best friends. We love to kick their ass when we play them, but they're great people, and they run a really good organization.
I'm gonna mute myself.
So yeah, it's very interesting, Michael. There's an old saying to I don't know if it was your question, Lewis, or maybe Lucas, but there's an old saying, never let a good recession go to waste, because there's opportunities. And we're quietly saying never let a good pandemic go to waste. And there, as challenging as that is for any business, there also becomes opportunities. And Michael referenced an article that was written this week saying that MLS is well positioned to come out of this because we've got really great deep-pocketed ownership who can withstand this. True. We're a single entity, which I won't go into describing, but it's an advantageous way to be nimble as a league. And so it's quite conceivable, Michael, that when we come out of this and a degree of normalcy resumes, that there's going to be that the overall global economics of soccer is going to be very different. And unlike any of other sports in our country, we're in a global marketplace. Baseball to some degree, a handful of countries are feeders, but NFL, it's college football. NBA, there's a handful of leagues, but you know who they are. In soccer, you're acquiring players from every corner of the world. We have 14 countries on our roster. From Ghana to Lithuania to Paraguay, and so it's quite possible that value of players, when this all settles, is going to recalibrate downwards because of obvious financial implications of the pandemic. And so we've had quietly internally discussions. Will this be a buying opportunity? Will we, as a team in the league, be able to buy players at a price that they weren't available a year ago, 6 months ago? So it's a really interesting observation, Michael. And I would also urge you to look at other industries too. Listen, it's awful, and there are lives that are changed forever, and businesses are not going to recover from this. But there are also going to be businesses that find opportunities because of it. And I think we as a league, I agree with the article. I think we as a league are in a position to come out of this, in a way that's strong and create some opportunities down the road.
Great, thanks so much. And I hope MLS comes back soon. But of course, take your time, because the longer you guys wait, the longer second. So
yeah,
I can wait.
And I think what you'll see with baseball and with us is as early as early summer or midsummer, and you probably read about this, TV-only games. I think that will be our initial reentry, which will be good, right? Certainly better than no games. And so, anyway, great question, Michael.
Thank you so much.
Right now we have a question from a different Michael.
Michael.
Hey, Mike. Thanks for calling me again, talking to us. My question is, do you see that it's possible for the MLS to be on par, like business-wise and popularity-wise, with the MLB and like the NFL? And if so, how do you envision to get to that point?
Yeah, it's a good question. Let me Michael, unmute yourself for a minute and let me ask you a question.
Sure.
In return. So in the 60s, Joe, when were you born?
63.
What's that?
1963.
Yeah, Joe and I are about the same age. So in the 60s, there were three sports that dominated the American landscape. And when you dominate, you talk about television viewership and sponsorship and attendance and column inches and mind space, etc. Michael, what were those three sports in the 60s?
Probably baseball, football, and basketball.
Nope.
No. You got one right, baseball.
Then I'm not sure.
All right. Well, you got one right, so that's not a completely failing grade. Anybody else out there want
Is
to?
golf one?
What's that?
Golf?
No.
Boxing?
Tennis?
Horse racing.
Horse racing?
No.
And
Hockey?
there's one-
Hockey.
No.
College football?
It's funny. It's not even like top of mind with you guys now, and it was a dominant sport, boxing. Boxing. So boxing, horse racing, and baseball. So, what's that? 2 generations, and it's a totally different landscape. And so, Michael, I think absolutely, for a number of reasons. Soccer is a global game, the most global game. It is universally appealing to every shape and size and every ethnicity in a way that no other sport is. It appeals to men and women more readily than other sports. Our percentage of women live attendance is higher than the other sports. If you look at people your age and younger, soccer is more relevant to them than baseball now. It is 2 hours and it moves. I love baseball and I worked in baseball, but a baseball game, 3 hours and 10 minutes is freaking hard to sit through. Soccer moves. There are no TV timeouts. And so I think the sport is really, really well positioned to continue its ascendancy. And even, Michael, if you take a snapshot of where MLS is today and you compare it to where it was 10 years ago, 15 years ago, remarkably different. So it's very easy to think that 10, 15 years from now, when you guys have my job, that it's going to be really different. So how fast, I won't predict, but to think that when you guys are my age and in my spot, that soccer is going to be, very much, in the conversation as the most popular sport. And, Michael, if you had a kid, would you want him playing football? I don't know. I don't think so. And football is awesome. It's a great sport and it's a great television sport, but there's some vital signs. There's some warning signs, I should say, in the football, that, I'd keep an eye on, and baseball too. So listen, they're part of the fabric. They're not going away, but seeing the kind of shift that we saw from the 60s to now, with soccer continuing its rise, I think is highly likely.
Right. Now we have another question from Lucas.
No more Michaels? Come on. Hey, Lucas.
So you keep saying that you think that MLS is going to keep growing. So I know your number one revenue for the past decade is selling franchises, as you said, up to $300 million for the Austin team, I believe. Why specifically do you think it'll keep growing even though you're losing the main revenue from selling franchises?
Yeah, it's not the main revenue, Lucas. It's still not the main revenue, but it's been an important revenue stream, to be sure. The expansion fees have been an important revenue, but it's not, we'd be profitable without our expansion share. So yeah, at some point, I guess implicit in your question is at some point that revenue, expansion revenue is going to go away. And you're right, it is, because we're not going to grow past probably 30 teams. But I think it was Michael Kahn's question about the broadcast deal. If you look at average attendance, we're higher than the NBA, NHL. If you look at a lot of different metrics, we're pretty comparable with the other sports. Where we're not comparable is our broadcast revenue, which is somewhat correlated to ratings. But we think there is huge uptick in potential for broadcast. And when we're filling our buildings the way we are and our product's improving and we know our broadcast situation is going to improve and where more and more young people are tuned into soccer as their favorite sport, et cetera, I think the overall economic tide is going to continue to rise. And it has. It has and will continue to. So yes, Lucas, you're right. There's been a degree of dependency on the revenue we've gotten from expansion fees, and that is finite. But all of the other revenue streams are going to continue to rise.
Great, thank you. Now we have Tom with a question.
Hey, Mike, thanks for taking the time to do this. Kind of going back on the point of stars in the MLS, just one example that I think of, Tyler Adams with the Red Bulls last year, then moving over to Germany. Do you think it's important for the MLS to try and keep young stars like that? And if so, how could they do that?
It's an interesting question, Tom, and it's again one of the unique features about soccer. If Mike Trout left the Angels, at age 24 to go play in Japan, that would be seen as like a horrible thing. But actually, when a player like Tyler Adams, who's a young player that New York developed, gets sold to a German team, that's a good thing in many ways, because it shows young players that you can come up our system and our league and go on to bigger leagues. And they sold him for a lot of money. That money's going to get reinvested in future players, and that's kind of a virtuous cycle. And so, is it good to keep young, exciting players in the league? Yeah, it is. But it's also good to know that you can create a market for your young players. Soccer is so different in that way. And so what's going to happen is, yeah, Tyler Adams went to play in Europe, but this young 17-year-old from Colombia is going to say, "Hey, I want a hot shot. I want to play in the MLS because it's a league that can catapult me. I can earn money, but I can catapult me." And so it's gonna draw more young players because they know it's an avenue to move on. And listen, we're not one of the 5-6 best leagues in the world right now. We're not, and that's okay. We aspire to be, and I think to Michael Beauty's question, we will at some point. So the fact that we can sell players to a team in Spain or England or Germany, that's a good thing. And the Red Bulls have been a good example of that. They've got new exciting players coming through the pipeline. And so will there be some players that are so transcendent that we're going to want to keep? Yeah, for sure. But soccer is unique in that way. And actually it signals that it's a healthy ecosystem when you're able to sell young players.
Gotcha. Thank you.
All right, now we're gonna go back to one of the Michaels.
Goals unite. Seattle.
I'm back. If it's all right, I'd like to actually ask about sort of the same ecosystem. So there's actually been a lot of change with the development in the academy. As you're probably very aware, with MLS sort of like stepping in for the DA. And I know that there's also been sort of a push to adopt more roster rules that are friendly to clubs that want to bring up, talented players from their own academies and sell them on for a fee, which they get like larger percent of to sort of incentivize that. So I'm wondering how this restructuring has either shifted or maybe it's going to incentivize further investment in the development academy, and how much of a focus that is, from your standpoint as the business lead, because, hopefully it's a long-term game. We'll get to a point where each professional academy is churning out these stars that are going to get sold abroad, but right now it's just the fact of where like American soccer is, you're not going to, more likely than not, you won't bear those fruits right away. So I'm wondering from your perspective as the head of business, what sort of, what kind of like dance it is to measure how much is worth investing in the academy versus towing like a realistic line of understanding that you might not bear fruits right away, or what are the geographic rules might change and other clubs can come in and just the general lack of sort of stability in like the youth ecosystem.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a great question. One that we've been contemplating quite a lot lately. So again, soccer is different than our other major sports. So if you're a young stud high school basketball player in Seattle, I should take Seattle for that. If you're a young stud basketball player in Oklahoma City,
Oh my gosh.
The Thunder have as good a chance as drafting you as any other team. Soccer's different. If Michael grows up in Oregon or Southern Washington and is a great soccer player and comes through our developmental system as early as U12, under 12, comes through our system, even if he goes to school somewhere else, we have rights to him if and when he turns pro. So we have incentive in developing Michael and developing the American player, because while it's expensive running these academies, if it can yield future players, it will pay a return. Michael's question is that return, happening? In some markets, yeah, like Dallas has really invested heavily, and they have a very fertile, rich in soccer players part of the country, and they have developed lots of players who are playing for their first team now. We've only had a couple. And so it's somewhat dependent on geography. It's now getting competitive. We're out recruiting kids around the country to come to Oregon, come through our academy. So we ask ourselves the question all the time: is it worth several $1 million a year, or are we better off going and spending $1 million on a young player and seeing if he pans out or not? So I don't know, Michael. It's always a shifting question, and with the COVID hitting and resources being reallocated, it's one we're asking ourselves a lot lately. But I think, generally speaking, teams are committed to development because it's the right thing for our sport. And getting back to your question, Michael, Michael Beauty, is that if MLS teams continue to really, and some are doing it really well, Seattle's been successful, that's going to be another engine or another driver of this league continue to rise, is us really getting kids to play and developing kids the right way and starting them on this professional trajectory the right way, in the most effective way. We're going to get the best young American athletes to play in our league. So it's a very, very germane question, Michael, and I think different clubs would answer it differently depending on their situation. That said, we're all committed to academy in some form. Some teams are doing it better than others, but I don't think that commitment is going to change anytime soon.
I hope you don't mind. This is just a really quick follow-up that when you mentioned Dallas, you made me realize. So they have a really unique partnership with Bayern Munich, and I'm wondering if that's something that's been considered, a similar partnership that would sort of provide like or like alleviate some of the expenses for the youth academy, if you had like a European team that sort of shared maybe a little bit of the cost for maybe a first right of refusal or something of that nature.
Yeah, I mean, every team has one form or another relationship with international clubs. We have a really strong one with Saprissa in Costa Rica. That's been a really, really great pipeline for us. And we have informal relationships with lots of different clubs around the world. Whether they're formal or not, whether they're marketing based, there's so many different constructs, Michael. I'll answer it this way. It's essential for any MLS team or any soccer team, anywhere for that matter, to have tentacles all around the world, and having people you can call up and say, hey, you're in Accra, Ghana. I heard about this young 17-year-old. Is he any good? That's how you find players. And conversely, they'll call you and say, hey, I heard you, would you sell it? And so formal, informal, we have relationships with scores and scores of clubs around the world, because that's how it works, is the players, it's such a fluid global marketplace, and it's no different on the youth development side.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I think we have one final question from Olivia.
Sure.
Yeah.
Hello. So
Olivia.
yes, sir. So obviously you work for both, the Timbers and the Thorns at the same time. And so how do you feel that these markets kind of differ between, the Thorns and the Timbers, obviously? And what do you think makes the Timbers so successful?
Yeah, it's interesting, Olivia. I think, the the women's league, the NWSL, is only in its 8th year. We're in our 25th year, so the maturation, evolution of the leagues are in a different place, and because of that, the economics are in a different place. And while some of the national team players make really great livings, the middle of the roster player and the women's side isn't making a lot of money, which is something we're really hoping to change. I'd say, you know, what a consistent theme is that our fans with Thorns, they're not like, I'm trying to do this to help women. No, yes, they are, and that's part of it. But they're doing it because they're loyal to the badge, and they're loyal to the team and to the game. And so in the same way, people, you know, root for the badge in men's game. That's what makes the Thorns. It's authentic soccer at the highest level, and that's something, Olivia. That is our league. The women's league is the best women's league in the world, and that's, as I said earlier, not the case in the men's side. So we didn't market it that differently. It wasn't like a women's play. It wasn't a LGBTQ play. It was soccer at the highest level by amazing athletes who are some of the best in the world. And that ran counter to somehow other teams were doing it. And I think that's been the success of the Thorns, is that it's the best women's league played by the best women who happen to be really good citizens. And just like I answered, I think it was Lucas's first question, you know, we've developed this relationship with the city and with the community and with our fans and with our sponsors. And the governor she's a huge Thorns fan. She'll text me, I'm at the game, you know, the governor, and she'll sneak in. Anyway, we took it really seriously, and we projected the Thorns as just authentic, high level, some of the best soccer in the world, played by some of the best athletes in the world. And I think that really resonated. It wasn't, oh, support your women because it's the right thing to do. Yes, that's implicit, and I think some people feel that way, but that's not a foundation you can build a long-term success on. It's, I love this game, I love its players, and I love this team that represents my city the right way, that does good work in the community, and there's good athletes who I'm proud of, and it makes my city look good. That's at the heart of successful sports franchises, is that the pride, the connection, the love that a team well run evokes, in a nutshell.
Great.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So let me just end by saying, you know, you guys, amazing questions, by the way. I was really, really impressed. A lot better questions than I get when I speak to college students or adults. So you guys, I'm able to do this anytime you want. But I'd say this, you know, before you remind yourselves, and even like I wrote down, I think when I got out of college what I wanted to do, because it may be hard sometimes to sort of stay on the track, and you guys are already so ahead of the game. You're knowledgeable and you have an interest and you're learning and you're not even yet in college. It's awesome. But don't lose sight of what's gotten you here today and why you're interested. There's going to be a lot of temptation and pull, and not all of you may go into sports, and that's okay too. But don't give up. It's really, really, I had my graduate school reunion at Stanford, and people have done very well, and people have been pretty happy with their career. But everybody came up to me and said, God, I wish I go out. And it was kind of a proud moment. And so don't forget, don't lose sight of this. Write down why you're already involved in it. Write down what you want to do. Stick it somewhere. Refer to it every now and then, because it's not going to be an easy ride. And because it's a hard industry to kind of break into. It's a hard industry. It's not a linear road for many people. Whereas if you wanted to be an accountant, you know what to do. You become an accountant. It's not like that. So you're going to have some twists and turns. And Joe and I both had twists and turns in our career.
We're turning at the same time at one point. So.
Yeah, you were twisting and I was turning at the same time. So you know, remind yourselves that you're doing it because, like, God, I tell you, when a day of a game, there's no better feeling. You know, you come in, you got vibe, and you start seeing people line up, and you walk around the city, and people are wearing Timbers gear, and you say hello to the security guard, and you say hello to the usher, and we're gonna win today, and the guy selling hot dogs, and the city of the stadium sort of comes to life, and fans come in, you see people you know, and you have a great game, and it is magical. It is magical. You have these goosebump moments in this career that so few other careers are lucky enough to have. And I've been in this for a long time, and it still gets me going in a way that I think very few people in other businesses do. So don't lose sight of that. Stick to your guns, and then in 10, 15 years, hire Joe and me. Okay, you promise?
There we go. Mike, thanks for joining us, everybody, once again. We'll be back to next Thursday, next week, 8:15 Eastern time. Tell your friends, follow the Thorns and the Timber. Hopefully they're going to be back pretty soon. It'll be interesting to see how this all evolves over the next week and how we keep going. But once again, Mike Golub, thanks for joining us for an hour. And hopefully we'll see you guys with even more people back next week.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.